So when you sleep at nighttime, when you lie flat, there's a drop in hydrostatic pressure within the body. And what that means is that normally the lymphatics use the gravity to drain the fluid. So your heart will pump blood around, but lymphatics drain from your face and your body and circulate around through gravity. When you lie down flat at nighttime, there's less sort of that gravity effect on the body. So interestingly, everyone's face swells at nighttime. Everyone's face. And it just depends on your muscle tone under your skin, under your eye area, as to how much swelling is accumulated in that space there. And it really, honestly, was like a light bulb moment for me and this mask.
The following is a long open conversation with Hannah James, founder of Elio Labs. We got a chance to sit and talk about many topics, like how was her early years studying interior architecture in both Japan and Australia, how were their venture designs with resorts around the world, and which are her current efforts with Elio Labs Singapore. I'm aware that this episode will be around the National Day celebrations in Singapore. So for everybody who is celebrating, may you all have a beautiful National Day. This is On The Long with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe and to contribute to the channel on the description below. And now with y'all, Hannah James.
Seems to be. Well, I've done, so my other experience is podcast normally just audio. So I was not expecting a video.
Well,
but I mean, it actually worked out quite well at the last minute.
Pretty much it is.
Looks like we've set it up for this discussion, but yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're good.
Well, I'm ready when you're ready.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Let's do this. 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on The Long with FVR. Today we have Hannah. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, so finally we got the opportunity to do an episode, and it was surprising to see that how the power of improvisation leads to a fantastic studio like this.
Yes, absolutely. It worked out quite well, I think.
Many people may be watching you and they will say, interesting person, we want to know a little more. So we'd like to ask you, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. So actually it's interesting that we've got this backdrop, because I think it sort of sums up my past life and my startup journey above with Elio Labs. So I actually was a resort designer before COVID hit. So this is sort of a model behind us of one of my private islands. And then of course everyone knows what happened with COVID. Everything went on hold in terms of the design world, particularly resort design. And so yes, started Elio Labs. And we are now 2.5 years in and going strong. So it's really exciting. So a bit of a pivot in my professional life, but it's super exciting to be in the startup world, and we see where we're going.
That's true, because from the hospitality to the tech world is such a huge jump, a huge leap of faith, but it's always good to see that faith is rewarded. Now, we are right now talking from a very singular location called Singapore, in the east side, the
Joo Chiat.
Thank you for the correction.
Yes.
So, how long have you been in Singapore?
Oh, I've been here for a long time. I've been here for about 15 years now. I thought I would come for 1 or 2, but then really enjoyed the resort design work that I was doing here, and so that then 2 to 3 led to 10 years, and then moved out to Joo Chiat area, which I love. I think Joo Chiat's got such a vibrant character, and that kind of mix of heritage but also sort of community. It's got a very laid back kind of vibe, which I think when you feel like you're sick of Singapore, you kind of want that, you know, the less controlled, less sterile environment, something that's really chilled, good food. And so then I moved in here, loved it. And then another 5 years passed and here I am. But set up my own shop, set up my own design studio, and now I'm running my own office in this hood. And it's great, love it.
I'm happy that you mentioned the distinction between the downtown and this area. And when we were coordinating this particular recording, you gave me 2 options: either come walking or take the bus after the MRT. And I have to say that when I was walking by this area, the homes and the neighborhood give me the vibe of this place in Houston called the Heights. It's like closer to the Washington Road. It's not downtown, it's not uptown, but it feels kind of chill. It's also not suburban. It looks like more relaxed. And I've begun to feel those winds again. It's like, look at that. It feels nice. But also I realized that around here there is a lot of high schools.
Yes, there are quite a few schools. There's a real mix around here, I think. Both the different housing types, but also people as well. Like you've got the mosque down here, then you've got the Chinese temple, and you've got the church over there, then there's an Indian temple. And I think with that comes different people. You've got houses, bungalows, you've also got HDBs, you've also kind of got apartments as well as shop houses, and all different diverse people and food. So I think that's what kind of gives it a real community feeling.
Exactly, that's right. Now, talking about communities, you mentioned you have been here for 15 years and you assembled a community. That also means that you come from another community before 15 years ago. So I would like to ask, how was your early years? How was young Hannah growing up?
So I'm from Perth, Australia, and I would say it's a very sort of typical, suburban Australian life sort of story. We lived in a house in the suburbs and doing what sort of most Australians do in the suburbs, sort of playing on the street with their neighbours and going to school and stuff. So it definitely was a shock, I think, moving to Singapore. It's a far more built up environment versus that. But I also kind of love the walkability that you get here. The downside with Australia is that you have to get in a car to get anywhere, a little bit like Malaysia as well, sort of driving everywhere. And I have to say, I haven't driven a car properly in 15 years, which is actually kind of nice. I appreciate the walking lifestyle instead of driving.
When you mention it, that kind of lifestyle also reminds me of the suburban life in Houston. Like literally, not in downtown, but you have a spring, you have the woodlands, you have Tombo. You need to drive.
Yes.
There's no other way.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think most cities really are car centric. I think it's quite rare to have a place where you can rely on public transport or walkability on its solely. And I really appreciate that. So I think that's why I've settled here, is that sense of community and walkability, which I think is harder to find sometimes these days. Yeah.
Now, can you take us back to that time when John Hannah decided to study hospitality and resort designs? How that little knack started?
Okay, so I actually studied architecture.
Okay.
And then, so my father was an architect, so I decided to follow in his shoes and I studied architecture. I then studied landscape architecture. I went to Japan, fell in love with Japanese design, where they're very good at bringing the architecture and the landscape together. So I wanted to kind of get both of those principles and understanding. And then that led me to a job offer in Singapore, working for a resort design company here. And as I said, I thought I would only be here for 2-3 years, but then the travel was fantastic, and here I am, still here, but now doing something else with Elio Labs. But I would say what's interesting, even though it is more tech and beauty, it is still design. And I think that's the interesting thing that I've realised, is that the things that you learn at architecture is really about problem solving. And yes, you learn sort of architectural principles as well, but it's really about creative thinking and problem solving. And I would argue that's still applicable and actually really important when you're in a startup company. How can you solve these problems as they come along, and continue to innovate your product.
The innovation, product design, and also resort design. It's like we are repeating that word, design. When you were studying in Japan, how did you realize how the complexity of mixing both landscape and architecture and the buildings? Because this is the first time I heard something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, the Japanese are very meticulous when it comes to design. Like, everything is very considered. But so it's about not only the views from the building out to the garden and designing and composing the garden for that viewing, but it's also how you move through and transition between the indoors and the outdoors. How can building open up to the outdoors, and we have these semi-indoor and outdoor spaces, and then how you move through it as well. Like they will actually design the experience of walking through a landscape and kind of the gentle unfolding of that. You know, you turn a corner and they'll design what you see, and then they'll contrast the experience of how enclosed or open that space is, and then even just picking plants that flower in different ways in spring versus autumn and things like that. So it's I don't know, I think there's just a level of consideration there for how the two, landscape and architecture, come together that I really appreciated, and that's I think also what makes resort design special, because it's very much about the place and how can you then appreciate that place and sort of accentuate the special details or highlight those details.
Picking up on those details and moving from Japan to Singapore, when you were executing those resorts, what was the most difficult craft you made during that time to say, this is my best design, this is my Magnus Opus?
I think the wonderful thing about it is that everyone was different. Particularly if you're drawing your inspiration from the site, which is what sort of company principles were about, which is really understanding a sense of place, understanding what makes that place unique, and then letting your design inspiration come from that. And I think that's really important in today's world, where the world is sort of becoming a bit same, and you, for example, see a Balinese-style resort in the Maldives, and or sort of international ideas that don't really take reference back to that place that you're in. And so I think the best thing about it, so each one was, it's hard for me to pick one, because each one was really unique. But what was the most, I think, exciting was really getting to know a place. Like we would spend 1 month researching a place, understanding the history, understanding what the local artists are doing, what the craftsmen are doing, what the local traditional architecture style was, how they even lay out their streets and town squares and that sort of thing, and then trying to really see how can we bring that essence to the project. And of course all of the resorts were very modern designs. We never sort of were trying to copy the old. I think that's an important distinction, but it was really about trying to, as I said, bring the essence in and kind of reference that past in some way, and make it so it really feels like it's modern, but it feels like it's of the place. So yeah.
I'm happy when you mentioned that you spend 1 month and a little more understanding the little details from how the things are done. In other professions like marketing and acquisitions and portfolio management, they call it due diligence.
Yes.
And it's like how the same thing is happening, like way before the planning and execution, you do that. So I'm very happy to see that across different disciplines, totally opposite in a certain terms, there are common grounds.
And I mean, a lot of people don't do that. I will say that there are a lot of designers that will just do a little bit of a few hours of searching on the internet, and then they feel like that's their site analysis done. Whereas I think it's different when you really do a deep dive and immerse yourself in the place. And I think it's also about spending time on the site as well. Like it's to wake up there. What is it like sunrise? To sort of hear the land come alive, at the crack of dawn, and then experience the sunset, and also sometimes sleep on the site. This island here actually slept there. And there were sandflies everywhere, and it wasn't very pleasant, but it was about really getting to understand a place, I think.
Let's go to that island. Anna, can you take us and explain what is there and how that design came about?
This particular island?
Yes.
Well, this one, because this is in Indonesia. This is off Pulau Belitung, and they're doing we went and spent a lot of time with the locals looking at their fishing industry and how they use the nets, and also there's a lot of basket weaving and crafts as well. And so this design incorporated a lot of those things into the details. And then also the way that it was the master plan captured sort of the essence of, or captured rather the strengths of the site. So in this case, this had 180 degrees of beautiful curved kind of ocean front, and so the main restaurant there has got a curved frontage to kind of take in that view and maximise that connection to the beach.
And when you did your due diligence and you mentioned that you sleep there,
yes.
So which were the difficulties? Because not many people decide to sleep on the beach.
Oh, and it wasn't very comfortable. It's not something I would recommend that you do often. But because this will be a nice 5-star resort, but it's not there yet at the moment. We were just in sleeping bags on the beach.
Oh no!
Not comfortable, and definitely not 5-star at the moment. But I think it is important, as I said, to wake up on the site and really then understand it in a way. Like there's something that happens that I think a lot of things are very intuitive as well, and it's just about feeling it and being there, and then in that then you sort of when you're making design decisions, like, yes, this feels right because I just have a sense of what this place is about. And so spending that time and soaking it up at different times of the day, I think is important.
Sleeping bags, and also that leads us towards the outdoor life. There is a huge spectrum of sleeping bags, because those ones for the low temperature, very humidity areas, and there are the ones for hiking that they are more thermal. So, what kind of sleeping bag do you use to go there?
Oh no, this was just something the client provided, and yes, it was really just something makeshift. So.
Okay.
Yes,
that's good.
We really were like on the beach, sleeping on a yoga mat. Yes, so it definitely was very rough and basic.
Yes, at least you have something.
So would not recommend that often, but I think it's an important part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Now, during your designs, was any big compromise that you have to do, let's say, with a client or with the environment or the process of your due diligence that you face it?
Compromise. I think most projects you're going to have a budget issue at some point, and then you're going to have to cut things back and compromise. I think that's a reality of doing a project. Where there are sort of restrictions with how much the budget can provide for. So, but then I think in that case it's about working out, well, what is really important to hang on to, and what are the little less crucial details that we can kind of let go and simplify down to cut the budget. So,
given that, because you're talking right now like an accountant, when did you realize that these transferable skills can also be applicable to Elio Labs?
Yes, I think exactly that. It really is, and I think that would be a key takeaway that I would say to anyone who is thinking of doing a startup but thinks that they don't have the necessary skills for that area, is that there's so much that you learn from different professions that is transferable that you don't realize. So yes, understanding how, like in my design life, how to manage budgets, do DD, innovate, all of those things are directly applicable to startup world. Particularly, I think when early days when it's just yourself. I mean, now there's 2 of us and we've got 5 part-timers working for Elio. But when early days, you're doing everything. You have to do you have to touch the accounting as well as the marketing, as well as the project development, the investor relations stuff, all of those things. But yeah, there are so many transferable skills. So in the point of, say, dealing with investors, I had no experience with doing an angel round. I didn't know where to start with any of that stuff. But I did have experience with, dealing with clients and, ensuring good relationships with, the team of consultants that I was working with. And those things are transferable, because at the end of the day, it's just about how you relate to people, your integrity in that regard, building relationships and trust, and and then being able to then successfully get people to believe in Elio Labs and and put some money in. So now we've actually been able to raise 1.2 million so far for Elio Labs.
Congratulations.
Which is really exciting, yeah.
Yes, and I have to be more emphatic on this because not many startups are actually declaring how much money they raise.
Yeah,
because
happy to acknowledge that, because I was having a conversation with the CFO last week, and it's true. Like we have managed to get some. We just finished a round just recently. So when I first met you, we were in fundraising mode, and we just completed our round about a month ago. And not only did we get some great funding support, but we also got some really exciting people who have industry know-how to support us. And I think that's the big piece as well that I've learned, is that it's not just about the money. It's not, yes, you need to get someone to open their checkbooks and support you, but it is almost equally as important that they can help you grow and bring some expertise as well. And so we've managed to get a dermatologist who has, highly regarded dermatologist who has 2 clinics here in Singapore to support us. And also we have someone who has Korean beauty sort of contacts too, who's interested in the whole idea of a beauty device for eye bags. And so he's also supporting us and will help with connections as we grow. So,
given that you are mentioning that context, and I see some of the products right there, you can show them.
Sure. So this is the Elio Labs mask here, which you can see is sort of floppy in the side, and then there's a hard frame in the middle. So how this works is we scan your face with our app, and then we make a completely custom fit mask that fits your unique contours of your eye area. And the reason that is important is because what it does is it holds your under eye contour in place at nighttime while you sleep. So this whole thing started and was inspired by compression stockings for your ankle. And then I realized if we can create a compression stocking for your eye area, then we can hold your under eye in place at nighttime and prevent the morning eye bags and eye swelling that a lot of people, a third of people, complain about when they wake up in the morning.
It's a very good principle that you're applying. Okay, full disclosure, the compression socks really work. I run marathons and I always use my compression socks because
they're highly effective.
They help put the tissue with the bone closer. Why is important? Because as you're going to mile 20, mile 25, the last mile, that can disjoint and you can get injured. But that actually puts things together. I guess I saved myself from catastrophic injuries many times, and to see that follow the same principle.
And it's the same thing for when people fly on an airplane. So how this started actually, because I've suffered from morning eye bags for my whole life, and then in my 30s they just started getting worse and worse and worse, and worse when I drink and when I eat salty food, which I love. And I thought, instead of giving up those things, surely there's a solution for this. And my mother is a doctor, and so I was talking to her, I sort of started to understand why we get eye bags, and then it goes back to creative thinking, and I started sort of problem solving and thinking, well, okay, there must be a better way to solve this, because everything on the market at the moment, rollers and creams, it's about moving the fluid from under the eye after it has already accumulated.
Okay.
And so I thought, if we can prevent it, if we can prevent the fluid from accumulating there to begin with, then that's a game changer.
Now, if you're preventing the fluid to flow to that place, where it goes?
So it actually just drains the rest of the face.
Oh.
So it's really interesting. So when you sleep at nighttime, when you lie flat, there's a drop in hydrostatic pressure within the body. And what that means is that normally the lymphatics use the gravity to drain the fluid. So your heart will pump blood around, but lymphatics drain from your face and your body and circulate around through gravity. When you lie down flat at nighttime, there's less sort of that gravity effect on the body. So interestingly, everyone's face swells at nighttime. Everyone's face. And it just depends on your muscle tone under your skin, under your eye area, as to how much swelling is accumulated in that space there. And it really honestly was like a light bulb moment for me and this mask. I was on an airplane traveling for one of my design projects, and I saw someone wearing a compression stocking on the plane, and I realized, this is exactly the same thing, because when you fly, there's less gravity. And in this case, because you're sitting down, the fluid will collect around the ankle area. And that's worse for people who have less muscle tone, or the elderly, or people with diabetes, where they have less sort of circulation around that area. And for anyone who's suffered from that, knows it's much easier to prevent it than try to move the fluid after the fact. So they're highly, as you said, they're highly effective at sort of preventing that stretching of the skin and that fluid retention in the area. So I thought, okay, if we can do the same thing for your eye area, then we can prevent that fluid accumulation in the morning. So it was like a light bulb moment I had on the plane. But then, of course, the complication, which is interesting, is that everyone's face shape is different. You can't put a compression stocking on your face because everyone has a different nose, everyone has a unique under eye area. And so I thought, if we can scan your face and then use 3D printing to create an accurate match, then we can hold the under eye contour in place at nighttime. So yes, and so it started with me just making one for myself, which was highly effective, and I was then just using it for myself. And then when COVID hit, that's sort of what pushed me, I suppose, into that world, to really give it a good run, and here we are.
I'm impressed. And this is also a product of its age, because if we put 20 years ago, there was no 3D printing.
Absolutely, yes. I think the timing was really right for all these sort of these different supporting technology to come together to get it to this point. So yeah, and we now have also, with some of the funding, we've developed an algorithm as well to help sort of automate the mask output. I think that's also an important piece, because previously it was very hard to commercialize a completely custom product. If you have to recreate the mask individually each time manually, then that's very hard to scale. But how it works at the moment is, once we have your face scan, we put it through our Elio algorithm, which crops and adjusts it and makes the file output for your unique mask in about 2 to 3 minutes. Just by contrast, if a 3D modeler was to manually do that, it would take about 90 minutes. So that's really got that down, and then we send it to the 3D printers, and then we print it, and then we ship it to you. So that technology piece there also allows us to commercialize and scale.
Now, let me take the side of the position for a moment. When they hear, wait a second, I'm giving you my data from my face, where that data goes finally?
So we have privacy policy in place. So after we've created the mask, we delete your data from our server, and all that is left is just the mask 3D file, which then is shared with the 3D printer. So your data does not leave Elio Labs. It's just the mask file that then gets sent out to a third party for printing.
That's good to know. Now, I remember during that time, it was, I guess, February that we met.
Yes.
And you were on fundraising mode.
That's
and
right.
You mentioned right now, which is July, almost August, that you happen to finally close that round. This is actually one good story to hear, because how many times we hear about startups that saying that we need to fundraise, but they take longer time than usual. And given your background, what suggestions can you tell to the young founders that they're doing this? Because timelines are very different.
Yes, and to be fair, so this is our second round. We had done, first round was 2.5 years ago. And I think, I really think it is just about perseverance and just talking to people. The more people you can talk to and build up those connections, and then you never know when someone is going to introduce you to someone, and then that's going to open a door. I think there's also there are a lot of initiatives in Singapore that support startups. So we were lucky to be invited to be part of Switch Tech and Innovation Convention last year in Sentosa. Our booth was supported by NAMIC, the National Additive Manufacturing Innovative Cluster of Singapore, basically 3D printing innovation. So they supported us there, and that's like a week-long convention. And it was so good for meeting people, and it was really honestly the connections that I made there that led ultimately to the people who were part of that round, just through other introductions through that. So I think it's really just about getting yourself out there and talking to as many people as possible and getting that kind of visibility. I think before you do that though, it's really important that you have a very clear idea of what you're doing and your business plan. I think if you can run out there prematurely, that can work against you. But we had already at that point sort of really firmly established our direction forward. So then it was really just about meeting the right people and timing.
That's true. Given that you have already been doing this and then Elio Labs, if we connect the 2 points, we have a line, and some people like to do a forecast. Chances are, as a serial entrepreneur, what else do you envision to keep doing in the future?
So I'm really excited about this technology because there are a lot of other applications, and I can't help but continue, to think about these other innovations from this. So we are already talking to plastic surgeons about using this same technology for burn victims, for people who have post-operative swelling around their heads, their face as well, which is a big problem. I mean, at the moment, the only solution is that they tell you to sleep upright for 2 weeks after you've had surgery, so that you're not lying flat and having that swelling problem, and that's not a good solution. So I think I'm really excited about taking this forward in terms of beauty, but also medical applications.
You know who would love to hear more about this? People who are in wrestling. I will explain.
Yes.
The wrestling, like NXT, WWE. Are you familiar with the wrestlers of the past, like The Undertaker or Kane, those big people? So it happens that this is a very famous story. Back in WrestleMania in the 90s, 1994, 1995, The Undertaker was fighting Yokozuna. And in one of those fights, all of a sudden he receives a big hit from the guy who is like 400, 500 pounds. Later on, Mark Calloway, which is the real name of The Undertaker, realized that this was fractured. He needed to go surgery, and it was a swelling. And because he was fighting every other day because of the scale, he needed to wear a different mask just to protect himself because it was swelled.
Yes.
And now that you mentioned that this can also help, I can imagine a lot of people that facing these kind of things and they need to be on the road again will be very beneficial.
Yes. No, there are some exciting applications for sure. So I think that will be the next step for us. And so I think that while we started sort of in beauty and wellness, we have the ability to go into sort of med tech with our current product and sort of the supporting technology behind it.
Now let's take a step back. So from Perth, going to Tokyo, and which place was in Japan?
Nagoya.
From Perth to Nagoya, and then Nagoya, Singapore, and then doing tech. There are many places to do tech. What made you say, I want to stay in Singapore?
To be honest with you, it was some of the early support that we got from the government. So let me rewind a little bit. Back to 2017, I had quit my previous design company and had opened up my own resort design company here in the Joo Chiat area. And I had the sort of the idea for this mask, but it was really at that point just developing it for my own use. I wasn't thinking beyond that at that point. I had my own, day job, so to speak. But I went to NUS because I realised that the first one I had printed myself on a very basic standard 3D printer was really uncomfortable and it was not a smooth finish, it was not great. So I went to NUS and said, hey guys, I went to the pharmacy department, I'd love to use your 3D printers to make this thing for myself. And I explained the idea that I had and what I wanted to do. And they were really excited about it, and they said that this is a great idea. would you be interested in developing it together and getting some grant funding? So we actually submitted, so I should say before we did the fundraising round, the very first supporting funds came from NAMIC through a research grant. So they gave us $250,000 to work together with NUS to develop it up. And so we had 18 months of R&D together, which led to a patent filing for the idea. And then it was at the end of that point in time, it was up to me to be able to commercialize it. I had the rights to commercialize it, or it was just going to sit on the shelf and just be really for my own use. And then COVID hit, and all my design work went on hold. And I think that's what really then launched me into this space. I think it takes a lot of guts to just leave your day job and do something full time without knowing where it's going to go. But I think because I didn't really have a choice. It was like watch Netflix for a year because no one's doing any resort design work. All the resorts are empty. Or give this a big push. And so I worked on it for then a year without pay. And then managed to get the team together, managed to get Sing Health support, managed to get some doctors to be on our medical advisory board, and get a business proposal in place. And I'd never written, a startup business proposal before. There was a lot of Googling of things and sort of learning as I went. But then I had that basic pitch deck together and that basic understanding of how this is going to work, that then allowed me to approach some investors and then do that initial fundraising round. So I think it was a part luck, part timing, and a part perseverance.
When you are saying this, I cannot help but reminding myself from the words of Denzel Washington. Back in 2018, he was releasing the movie The Equalizer 2, and he was in an interview with the NBA on TNT, and Charles Barkley asked him if he was part of those things that he needed to hustle around. And then he quoted this: "You gotta do what you have to do so you can do what you wanna do." And that line was repeated when you were mentioning that you either got the chance to watch Netflix for a year, or you start hustling and working on something that was already there, because you just got to get paid, and also creativity was flowing.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. And yes, well said, I would agree.
Well, I didn't say it, but there's a Washington to say that.
Well, absolutely, very good reference, I agree. It makes perfect sense.
Now, having living in Singapore for many years, I guess people may see you as Australian, but you feel also Singaporean. So I need to ask you, what it feels like to be a Singaporean?
Well, I'm not sure if I say la enough, even though what does it feel like to be a Singaporean? I like it here, I do. I think it's a great base, and I feel like now that I've found the Joo Chiat area, this really suits me and does feel like home. And I've received so much support from different Singapore institutions for this startup that it does feel like there's community, social community, but also a professional community that's very supportive that I appreciate here. So yeah, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be in Singapore for, but it's home for the time being.
That's good to know. Now, from other places of the world, they have stereotypes to people that come from other places, and they always have a stereotype on people from Australia. So I want to give you the place to say what these people are missing when they want to stereotype people from Australia.
I think that wherever you go, there are so many different types of people. And yes, if you just, for example, if you just went to Bali and just went to Kuta, then you would only see one very small slice of what Australians can be like, and they can be very loud and boisterous in that part of Bali. But that's just a very small section of what the community can be like. I mean, one of the things I also really like about Australia is that it's very multicultural as well, and lots of different people from lots of different places, and so that diversity. I think that's why I really like the Joo Chiat area. There's a similar kind of thing there. Now, there's also some issues as well, and some tension that can come with that. Not going to be naive. That does exist as well in Australia, but yes, there's also there's a laid back openness and integrity, I think, with a lot of Australians that I appreciate, that maybe some people miss.
Now, the following can be a little controversial, but...
Sure, I love a controversial question.
How do you see people from New Zealand?
Well, we have like a bit of a rivalry with them, right? So of course I'm gonna have a slightly look. I have a lot of friends who are New Zealanders. So,
they might be watching this. Right
yeah, I've got to be well behaved. But no, there's an amusing rivalry with them. You know, they think that they're better than us, and we have the opposite opinion. So, but I think there's also, while we like, you know, teasing each other and sort of putting each other down in jest, there's also kind of a, you know, a brotherly sort of family-like relationship there as well, where, because we're very similar in some ways, and we appreciate that. I think they get our sense of humour.
Mm-hmm. Which is good. At least they recognize that sense of humor, which is always nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the Matildas playing in the World Cup, which right now is happening in the World Cup. Or on the rugby, you always have the All Blacks doing the dance before the game. And sometimes you call to each other, look at that, those are the Kiwis, and you are like the kangaroos, or I don't know. But it's like, look at that, they like to tease each other.
Yes.
It's like they recognize each other, like
yes.
Game recognize game, which is always good.
Yes. I think that's also a fundamental sort of Australian New Zealand trait, is that if we like you, we will show our affection by giving you know,
that rough love.
That's right.
Yeah, in Spanish will be amor apache.
Yeah.
Which is okay, kind of rough.
Yes.
Otherwise,
and you know, you give it to me, I give it back. You know, and that's how we tease to show our affection.
Which is very important to understand, because some people may say, wait a second, why are you too stingy with that person? No, it's because I care for that person, that's why you show that,
yes.
Which is can be interpreted in different ways. Now, Australia has different seasons, and here it's always humid, it's always hot. How did you got related to that weather? It was familiar to you, or it was something that you had to adapt?
Oh, I definitely had to adapt. Like when I first arrived, I remember I could not wear jeans outside. Like it was just too hot. I'm so used to that dry heat, where if you're in the shade, it's not a problem. You don't feel it. Whereas here, that humidity can be all consuming. And I remember when I first walked out of Changi, and you walk into this wall of hot, dense air. So yes, I had to. It took me a while. I think it took me a good 6 to 8 months to be able to wear jeans outside comfortably.
Wow.
But then now, you know, I wear them all the time, and I've adjusted. And I think now it's the reverse. I went back to Australia, and it's winter time at the moment down there.
You need a jacket.
And I've completely lost my tolerance for winter. So, because I haven't had a winter, I haven't lived through a winter in Australia for 15 years. So, wow. I think I have, yes, lost my tolerance for that. And
you know, I need to discuss with you something that it was discussed with Persis, a friend also from Singapore. Because when I mentioned to her that I own a leather jacket, it's like, wait a second, you have a leather jacket in Singapore? And it's because coming from Houston, you have the weather and the seasons, but here you get so used to only one single temperature that once you heat, where is my jacket?
yes.
Which is very, very important always to have right there in the closet. But also number two, the time zones. I mean, from the Americas to here is like 12, 13 hours, but from Australia it's like 4 hours, right?
Yes, or to Perth is about 5. Yeah, from here.
So how did you adapt the time zones at the beginning?
Oh, okay, sorry. So it's to fly down is 5 hours. In terms of time zone, Singapore and Perth are on the same time zone. And then the eastern states is 2 hours,
Okay.
2 hours ahead. So very easy, really. I mean, I have friends who are from the UK and also friends from the States, and that's a whole other ballgame to try and keep in touch with family and friends when they're on the other side of the planet. But Perth, same time zone, it's very easy and very quick and easy to get down there if need be. So I feel like I get the best of both worlds. I've got Australia's on my doorstep. If I want to go down for a long weekend, I can do that if need be. And if I wanted to reach out and talk to people at the same time, it's easy.
Yeah, I certainly believe so. I've been in other places like Vietnam, Singapore, Bangkok, which is in Thailand, and I see similarities but also see differences. I need to ask you, which are the little differences you have seen across the regions you have been?
Oh, well, there are lots. I mean, obviously, food changes, how people dress changes, the architecture and sort of the environment changes, their details, their art, their craft, everything is very... there are similarities, but there are also subtle differences. And I think maybe I'm even more aware of that because of my design training, where we're really trying to look for that, what makes that place unique. So it really depends where you go. But I think that for me is the joy of exploring a new place, is trying to sort of understand those little subtleties.
Now, I need to ask you a professional question, because you have this skill and craft from the designing. Recently, Changi received the best airport in the world, but they are always part of the position that say Changi is overrated. So, can you tell us from what you see in the Changi airport, which are the pluses and which are the things that they need to work out?
They do some things really well, I do agree. Anyone who's been through Changi Airport would agree it's very fast and efficient and easy. Everything from checking into the wayfinding has been thought through. I think that's something that I appreciate from the design world, because it's not just about how something looks, it's how you experience it and how you know where to navigate through it and that kind of ease of transition. I think they do that really well. I think they're obviously trying to have quite heroic architecture.
They have that.
Yes, and I think they're also trying to do a lot of sort of tick the boxes. Like, we have the biggest butterfly enclosure in the world. We have, the biggest the jewel with the waterfall. I think they're always trying to do that as well. We're the biggest and best in the world. I think some things that they could improve upon, though, would be sort of bringing in the more homely element maybe to that. Like, I've heard a lot of people who are in transit going through, and I think if you're going in transit and it's during the day, there's a lot of things you can go and see and you can do and activities, which is great, but also kind of like people want to retreat to sort of darker, cozier corners and maybe to have a little bit more of that stuff. But I have to say, though, I've been through a lot of airports in my time traveling around Asia. I have to say it is a very good, very comfortable, generally well designed space. But I think there's always room for improvements as well.
Yeah, it's true. There were elements that I began to realize, look at that, maybe it's because of the National Day or something like that. But also it's like the flow, how you go from point A and point B, is really remarkable, I have to say, compared to other airports in the region. Well, let's say, I was in the Emirates during October and November last year, right before the World Cup started, and we had to pass by the Doha airport. And I got to say, Doha airport and Changi airport, they are not the same. They are not the same because I feel the flow in Changi a little better. I'm not sure what is going on. But Doha was nice, you see all the brands, the big bowl, World Cup and everything, but maybe because it was a picture of the moment. I need to pass by there again, because I was in Changi actually 2 days ago. So, okay, that's something that always take with a grain of salt. Not because it's a World Cup or National Day Parade that they're going to overshine. Get them on any given Tuesday, and then you will see which is the real core and the essence.
Maybe I can add to that a little bit. I think a lot of people think design is visual and aesthetic, And it is, but it's also more than that. It's how you feel in a space and how we just said it, how you move through a space. And most people, unless you're sort of design trained or you're sensitive in that way, won't know why a space doesn't work. They'll just feel like, oh, I like this space, or I feel uncomfortable or in this space, but they won't really know why. And it's so much about the senses and the textures, the light quality. Yes, how easy is it to wayfind? What are the sort of the different materials and how they come together? Does the space echo? What's the sound in the space like? Senses, the smell, all of these things come together. And as I said, most people won't realise, that the lighting is bad. They won't be able to maybe pinpoint it. They'll just feel like the space feels echoey and too overlit and or a bit confusing, but they won't be able to narrow it down. And so I think that's what's interesting about design, is it's not just something that looks good. It's about really designing the overall experience of a space and how all of those things come together to ultimately make you feel comfortable in a space.
Talking about design and how the places make you feel, we are also experiencing right now in Singapore something that has been going on for 58 years, the National Day and the parade and everything. I was walking through the streets, and it's true that the design of the city makes you feel different, and also the color and architecture. But I need to ask you, what it feels like to live in Singapore during the National Day parades. It's really hard to pass by because the streets are closed,
Yes.
or what is it like?
Well, I just normally avoid I normally avoid the road closures and things like that. I mean, I was going into the city the other day to meet some friends, and what should have taken 15 minutes in a taxi took like 50 because of road closures and things like that.
Wow.
So thankfully it was a flat fare, and so it was all good. But I will normally avoid those busy areas and avoid the big crowds. Not for me. I think some people love it. Some people love getting into all of that. But I've done it once. I feel like I've ticked the box, and then I'm now just there. Let them do your thing, and I'll just avoid the area until it's all over.
There are moments, and there are moments. Yeah, I agree. Like if you want to see Tame Impala in Perth, you need to expect a big mass of people because everybody wants to hear Tame Impala. But if you want to meet some people, and it's like any given Tuesday, they're not supposed to go so many. Another point that I can also add on is there is something called the glue pods, on the tails, the inns in Singapore, and then sometimes you need to go to the stairs because there are no elevators. Okay, anybody can do that. But the problem is once you experience the heavy weather, and then there is a lot of people because they are being doing on a tourist group, checking out from the same inn, and then there is somebody burning something on the outside. It can be like a humidity trap. And you may say, it's because of the people. No, it's because of the environment, everything and stuff. But it's not because what's the sign, it's just something that happens. True, moments and moments. Now, being aware that we are sharing a moment, I want to ask you, what would have been Hannah if she decided to not follow the path of the tech entrepreneurship? What else you should have been doing?
Well, I think that really comes back to that whole sort of COVID situation and the fact that I was pushed in this direction. I think I would still probably be doing resort design work, really, had I not been kind of given a nudge, let's say. I mean, I've always had an entrepreneurial streak. I was just, even at 10 years of age, I was making Christmas cards and selling them at the local market. So I've always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial streak, but I think I just would have kept doing what I was doing because I had it was paying the bills and I had sort of some great clients. But I wanted to take this forward, but I think life then just sort of gave me a nudge to sort of push me outside my comfort zone and do that. But yes, to answer your question, I would probably still be doing design.
It's fascinating that you mentioned that because if we put the context and even the video outside, it will sound like a generic answer from any MBA. who's doing what you're doing in the MBA.
Mm.
And it's like all of a sudden an environment and the right people on the right time make you to do new things that otherwise would never happen, which
Yes.
is very, very fascinating.
And actually, I will add to that. While I love design, and obviously I can talk about it very passionately, as we have been, you get to a point where I think I sort of was in, it was my comfort zone. I could design, these things in my sleep. And yes, every site is different, and that's what I think brings, the difference from, or the exciting variation from project to project. But doing this has really pushed me outside my comfort zone, where learning about everything from patent filings to how you talk to investors, to how you vesting schedules and cap tables and marketing strategies and branding and all these things that I had to sort of take what I knew, but then really push myself to grow and learn in these different areas and talk to people, experts in those areas, but ultimately kind of expand my knowledge base. And I think I'm really glad that I went that way, because I feel like I am learning something new every day, and that's where you feel like you're really growing, as opposed to same old, I know how to do this, and not really pushing.
Now, we have been discussing about the technical and the business side of Anna. I would like to ask what Anna does when she's not into the technical or in the business, especially in a place like Singapore. What do you do?
Oh, what do I do outside of this? Well, I mean, I love going out with friends, and good food is always good. I'm always into sort of interesting cultural events or art events or things like that. And then otherwise, I love my meditation and yoga and downtime like that. If you've had a really stressful week, that's how I kind of re-find my center, is regular meditation.
So, do you call yourself a yogi?
No, I wouldn't say that, but I'm definitely a convert. I definitely would say that meditation is the way forward.
Convert. Like, I remember a friend, and I have to share this. So, in the program that we have been doing, there is a cafe called Ben's, and for people who are studying there, they got a 50% discount. The chicken sandwich that they sell there is so good that in NUS it's like $20, rather you get it for 8 ringgits. So you see the difference, and the quality is even better.
Wow.
So a friend of mine, Oroluga Laitan, who I hope is watching, he mentioned that, Fabian, you made me convert. What do you mean? We both are Christians. What do you mean? No. He was converted because he wanted to get this sandwich like for dinner, like as much as possible, as long as he was in the city, because he loved that. And it's like, wait a second, convert is such a heavy word. Because how many times you see like the interfaith relationship, like they want them to convert or not, it's like, wait a second. That's delicate.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden we're talking about a chicken sandwich. It's not the same. And when you mention that you call yourself a convert on the yogi state of living, like, wait a second, is that?
So actually, I'll just share a story of how I got into it, which is interesting. That's to do with my previous boss, my other design company. So he was a massive, was very much into meditation. And I had done a little bit of that with yoga, but 10 minutes on the end of a yoga practice is very different to being a real meditator. When I say that, I mean meditating half an hour every day, that sort of thing. And he really believed that, and I do too now, that it helps with not only stress relief, but also your innovation, your creative thinking, your ability sort of to problem solve, all of that. And it's not about religion at all. It's really just about understanding your brain and trying to optimize the way that you think. And so he offered to all of his staff, and we're a small boutique company, it's kind of 12 of us, anyone who wants to go and do a Vipassana course, and it's free. The Vipassana is basically by donation. It's run by volunteers. You can do it the world over, and it's run by volunteers, and it's up to you how much you want to give at the end of it if you feel like you got value. But it's 10 days, no speaking, no writing, no distractions. 10 days of like silent retreat where you're meditating every day for about 8 hours. So it's full on. And he said, anyone who wants to do it, and you have to want to do it because it's not easy, he would give the annual leave to do it. So you have your standard annual leave in Singapore, right? And that can be quite low actually compared to, say, Australia. But so you've got your standard annual leave, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But if you did this meditation, he would give you the extra 10 days of annual leave on top. But you have to finish it for him to give you the annual leave. If you leave halfway through, that's on you. That's your annual leave. Oh. So there was myself and just this other girl who decided to take it up, and I don't think I would have done that had he not given that leave. I think for me it's always about that precious leave was about going back to Australia and spending that quality time with family. But if it's on top of that, what have you got to lose? And it's hard. It's like boot camp for your mind. It's mentally challenging, painful to really sit there and push yourself through it. But you then realize this whole other way of like a clear thinking being that I think then really does help in everyday life about not getting stressed about small situations or not letting your mind sort of run with things that aren't productive, and really having a focus that helps with, as I said, creative thinking, problem solving. So I did 2 of them.
Wow.
And full on, but definitely an amazing experience. So
that's impressive.
So in a way, he if you're going to use the word convert, he converted me with the lure of extra leave, but it worked, and I don't think I would have done it otherwise.
Let me dissect the story, because there was an incentive, but halfway there, Hannah became more disciplined. So I guess through the journey, you realize that you can adopt the discipline of doing this moving forward, and that has been ever since. I also have seen these kind of stories with people who go fishing. They go fishing not because they want a big fish, because when they are sitting on the lake in the middle of the boat and you hear that and you start meditating without even knowing, until you finally receive the call of the nature that the fish has been caught. What I see different is that on the boat, the fish tells you, hey, it's time to close the meditation. Here is your own call.
Yes. And it's true, there are many different ways I think that you can get into that meditative state. Some people like running, and it's that same thing, you're getting into the zone when you're running. So I think, and yes, fishing, I think there are many different ways, different paths to the same kind of outcome. But I think equally sort of profound, sort of quiet moments of reflection are really important. To then, I think, know, that's when you have the aha moments, or that's when you go, oh, no, this is what is important in my life, or I really should do this, or I should do that, and you kind of get that insight, I think, in those moments.
Now, let me take again the side of the opposition, who may say that meditation, through yoga, is like an expensive way to get bored. Because in both paths, all of a sudden you are getting the aha moment. What can you tell to them that they are missing in this argument?
So I think actually meditation is the means to being more efficient in your day-to-day. And so, that's proven out to me. A lot of people say, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time for half an hour. I don't have time to meditate. And I have days like that where you feel, you've got so much to do and you just don't know how you're going to get it all done. And they're the days that I make myself meditate. Because by putting aside that half an hour, suddenly even my to-do list, I get clarity on the to-do list and realize actually some things are not that important, or I can tackle it in a much more efficient way. And it always seems to unlock things in terms of my productivity if I have just done that meditation practice beforehand. So I think it's actually about investing the time to then be more efficient in your doing. So it seems sort of like the reverse, to not do something to then be better at the doing.
That's such a clarity and powerful message. Yeah. And
I would also say it's really helped me out with this startup journey, because there are so many times where you just, I don't know how to move forward here, I don't know what to do, how do I solve this, I don't have this expertise, and it's really helped me as well, I think, to then work out how to meditate those sort of tricky questions that pop up. And they do. There are so many, the startup journey is like this, right? So, when you're doing this, it really helps to then get back up again.
I really enjoyed this conversation, and I believe that there's going to be a lot of people watching this, and also very young Hannahs watching this as well. And I would like to ask you something that they may ask as well. What piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
To follow your passion without letting fear limit you. I think we're, you think, oh, I can't do that, I don't have the expertise, or I can't do that, I'm not good enough, or I can't do that, I don't know how. But I think if you let passion lead you and follow that, just step by step by step by step, then you can do some really exciting things.
I'm really glad that we had this conversation. I cannot find a better way to close this episode. Hannah, how can people find you?
So EllioLabs.com. You can reach out to us through the helpline there. And
there are no discounts nowadays, right?
We can sort some discounts out if you reach out and mention my name, for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I really enjoy doing
Thank
this.
you, that was great. Me too.
Well, for people out there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye.
See you.